This episode is sponsored by The Alcohol Experiment, a free 30-day challenge designed to interrupt your patterns, give you control, restore your health, and put you back in touch with the version of you who doesn't need alcohol to cope, relax, or enjoy life. More than 220,000 people have already tried The Alcohol Experiment for themselves and have seen improved sleep, increased happiness, reduced anxiety, and so much more. Join thousands in this inspiring, hopeful, and exciting program where you examine your beliefs and reconnect with the best version of you without ever feeling like you're missing out. Start today for free at alcoholexperiment.com. Hi, this is Annie Grace, and welcome to This Naked Mind podcast. And I'm here with Kim. Welcome, Kim.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Oh, it's so good to have you. So why don't you sort of take us back to the beginning? Where did it all start for you with alcohol?
Okay. Well, my drinking started when I was about 15, and this was back around 2001-ish. And I should mention that my drinking and my distorted eating behaviors kind of developed around the same time. I've always been an anxious person, anxious child and everything, although we didn't really realize it at the time. And I've always kind of suffered from low self-esteem and, lack of self-worth and everything. But, as a kid and as a teenager, I just thought it was normal, these feelings. And then also around that time as well, my family life really started to become a lot more chaotic. My parents had divorced a few years prior to that. And I mean, it was amicable divorce. Everything was, okay. But I had a really stagnant relationship with my father. It wasn't bad, just very underdeveloped, I guess. There wasn't really, and then my mom and I were always close, but she got into a new relationship at the same time with a man, and it'd go on for 8 years. It was a very toxic relationship, back and forth, a lot of breakups, things like that. And it just basically, the combination of those two things just kind of turned our household into, chaos and turmoil. I had very little lack of parental guidance. And I'm the oldest of three. So a lot of things kind of like fell on my shoulders at that time, as well. I was never really taught how to deal with emotions, deal with stress. Any issues that arose, in our family was kind of just brushed under the rug, not really talked about. And then, so anyways, I grew up in Northwest Indiana, and drinking just kind of was something that my crowd, did. It wasn't anything, different. It was drinking. And then this is also the same time that opioids kind of started, surfacing as well in the early 2000s. I never got into that, although a lot of people close to me did. And so alcohol was always just my crutch. It was just, something that I gravitated towards. I was kind of shy, so it loosened me up a little bit. I felt less awkward in social situations, and it pretty much just numbed me from feeling anything. And then in regards to the, the distorted eating, that was now I can look back and know that was more of a means of control when my life, felt very out of control. And these two behaviors, along with some other, negative coping mechanisms of, self-sabotage, things like that, or just behaviors that I held on to throughout adulthood because I never, really learned how to deal with them. When it comes to drinking, I think it was viewed in my household as just normal teenage behavior. Neither one of my parents came from a background where they struggled with, drinking or anything like that, but it was very normalized in my family. Family parties, things like that. And so, yeah. And then I was, I got decent grades. I, had a long-term boyfriend. I had, friends that just from the outside, everything looked okay. So there was really no red flags on that end. When I was 19, so this is, shortly after I graduated high school and I was in college, which those are my floundering years. I was introduced to Adderall, and Adderall is very prominent, in the high school and college settings. And that's kind of when my drinking and my eating disorders really started taking off. I didn't realize how toxic at the time that Adderall was, especially, well, I mean, when you combine it with alcohol or any, other substances. I was never formally diagnosed with ADD or ADHD. It was honestly just went to my family doctor because I heard about it from some friends and said I couldn't concentrate, and I was, prescribed it. So I was legally prescribed it, but I was definitely abusing it and misusing it. And that in conjunction with, it suppresses your appetite. So it can be, looked at as like a diet supplement, as, well. And that led to a lot of restriction during the day, drinking a lot of caffeine, and then turning to alcohol at night to kind of like try to like wind down or continue partying, later into the night. And, like I said, I didn't know all of the, really toxic side effects of it, low blood pressure, increased heart attack or increased risk of heart attack and stroke, just really abnormal behavioral issues. I had a lot of trouble sleeping. I had a lot of paranoia, just very agitated and very flaky. And this cycle went on for, well, when I was 19, and I was finally able to get off it when I was 25. But it was just like I was running in circles. And I was failing in and out of school. I was working part-time, or, working full-time or part-time, and then going to school full-time or part-time, but failing out of a lot of semesters. I would, drop out if I knew I was going to fail, things like that. And no one really ever, questioned me. They just kind of thought I was floundering. A lot of times in my family, they thought that, this is the time in your life where it's okay to make mistakes, and that, I'll eventually figure it out. But I don't think that's always good advice, because sometimes you just, really don't figure it out, and you actually need some guidance. This is when I also started really hiding my drinking. Vodka was my drink of choice. And I mean, I would joke about it back then, but I would have like water bottles of vodka with like a little star on top of it. And that's what I would kind of keep in my bag. I mean, sometimes I'd be drinking during class, at work. And it was always just, like sipping. So I was always just like at a constant, but it was just, there was no progress in my life. I was severely depressed, had bad anxiety. And the whole time that this was going on, I never really thought about alcohol being, the culprit of it all. And I mean, obviously I know that there's other mental health issues that go along with it, anxiety, depression, things like that. But it was just so normalized. And like everyone else was drinking. And I also, because I had friends that were dabbling, or, struggling with, drugs, I kind of thought because alcohol was legal, like it was better. And, in some way it was, less, it was better in some way. I was in a long-term relationship, with my high school boyfriend during this time as well. And he didn't, struggle with the Adderall or anything, but like he did drink, and it was just never really, a problem with us or anything like that. And then, that relationship started going downhill, as we entered our early 20s. We were just like growing apart, wanted different things. And then that ended when I was about 23. And then I met my now husband when I was 24. And he was completely different. He's never struggled with alcohol or anything like that, but he's also not one to really understand mental health issues or, addiction. But at the time, I didn't think I was, was addicted or anything like that. I was still taking Adderall at this time, very, very flaky. And about a year into the relationship, after many attempts, I was finally able to get off the Adderall. And at that time was my first bout of sobriety, because I've had a few other bouts of sobriety in the past. And it was just kind of at the point in my life where I knew something needed to change. We were at a turning point in our relationship. He was going to school, but he had graduated, and he was prior enlisted in the military, and he was going to go back in the military as an officer. So he went away to officer candidate school. And I kind of knew, like, if I'm going to, be with this guy, like I have to change my behavior. And I also, I don't know, I was just kind of ready, but there was always a means to an end when I had my other bouts of sobriety. It wasn't because like I wanted to. I mean, I did, but I wanted to because I knew I needed to graduate college. I knew that if this relationship was going to work, like I needed to change my behavior, like stuff like that. So I was able to, get off the Adderall after, weaning myself off and things like that. And I did stop drinking. I think it was about 6 months. And that was my longest, bout of sobriety at that point. And I didn't have any withdrawals or anything like that. That at that time, I went back to school. This was during the summer of 2011. And I mean, that this should have been like a indicator right there, but like I got on the dean's list like that fall. I got, straight A's rather than failing out. And my relationship with, my family started improving. I started feeling better about myself. My eating disorder behaviors, pretty much, ceased during that time, because when I was on the Adderall, like I said, there was a lot of restriction, but then a lot of like binging when I, was hungover or, and things like that. So I was able to, overcome that, although I never dug into those issues. It was just like, I just like stopped. The spring of 2012, things started, still got better. I was back to drinking again, but I was moderating. And I guess I did an okay job moderating, but it was very hard for me. I never saw the point of just having one drink. I just didn't see the point of it. If I was having one drink, I always wanted to know like when the next one was going to be. But I was able to do it. So I also thought because I'd stopped for so long that, I was okay. And then I didn't have a problem or anything like that. We ended up getting married the following year in June 2012. And then he was assigned his first duty station, in El Paso, Texas. So I needed to finish school. I had about a year and a half left, and I moved out there with him. And I just finished, I was a full-time student, and things were okay. I didn't have, my eating disorder behaviors were pretty much non-existent during that time as far as like restriction and binging goes. However, I did start working out excessively. But that was the time that a lot of like I don't know what they're called, but like influencers and stuff like that on Instagram, you know what I mean, started posting their workouts and stuff like that. So I thought that was just normal too. I started running and like, so it's like I took, one, bad, behavior and just compensated it with something else. So I was still moderating during that time. And then in 2013, July of 2013, but year after we were married, I got pregnant, and I ended up having a miscarriage when I was about 15 weeks pregnant. So, and that was in the middle of my last semester in college, because it was September that we lost the baby. That kind of is what started spiraling me out of control during that time, is after, I had the DNC, and I was able to start drinking again. I definitely did. And that's when the binging really started again. I would be okay during the week, have my rules, moderate, except on the weekends. I would drink. And I should also note that like when I would drink, I was always a binge drinker. Like I couldn't just have one, in blackouts or brownouts, where I would remember some things, but not everything, were super common. And I honestly just thought that was normal for years, up until a couple years ago when, people were like, no, I don't black out all the time. And I'm like, I ended up graduating from college that year, in December, with honors and everything like that. But we were in El Paso, and I had a really difficult time finding a job. I'm not bilingual. I ended up taking a few more college courses to get some certificates shortly after I graduated, but the cycle still continued. We started trying for another baby pretty much right away, and without, we weren't successful or anything like that. So about, 4 to 5 months in, my doctor we started doing some fertility testing. And she wanted me to be put on some, medications to induce ovulation and stuff like that. So we started fertility treatments, and then my husband, and that was like all spring long of 2014. And then my husband came home in July one day from work and said he was deploying and he was leaving within 10 days. So that was our first deployment together. And I was, obviously devastated. I was a new, military spouse, and place, that I didn't really, know where I was living, and, no family around. We were in the middle of fertility treatments, and a lot of my, friends at the time were getting pregnant and having babies and growing their families. And when he left, I took advantage of that. And when I wasn't working, because at this time I ended up finding a job. When I wasn't working, I was drinking. And I never drank on the job or anything there, but I mean, that's pretty much like what I would schedule my life around, is when I was able to drink. And this went on for 10 months because he got back the following May. And no one really noticed. I mean, I wasn't living around family. I was very good with there was a few instances where I got myself in, trouble, or, would wake up in the morning and be like, oh my gosh, did I post anything on Facebook? Anything like that. But I wouldn't make any phone calls. I would, try not to text when I was drinking, so no one would know. And I was very discreet, in that area. He ended up coming home in May of 2015. We went back to doing some fertility treatments, and then the doctor ended up telling us that IVF would be the best route for us. We have male and infertility, or male and female fertility factors. So we ended up, our IVF was scheduled to start in October of 2015, and I ended up getting pregnant naturally the month before. And now we have our daughter, 5-year-old daughter. So during that time, thank you. It was, I hate saying it, but it was a miracle. I didn't have any issues not drinking while I was pregnant, but the morning I got a positive pregnancy test, my husband was in the field at the time, I was hungover. I remember I took a test a few days before because being going through fertility treatments, which, like, obviously I know that drinking can affect your fertility, but I didn't want to believe it. And because it was more of a male factor that we had rather than female, I kind of just took advantage of that. But I took a pregnancy test, and then a few days before, because I knew that I was going to have a few off days, coming up, and it was negative. So I was like, okay. And then the morning that I ended up getting a positive test, I'll just never forget that. I was so hungover, and then I'm Googling, things, and anyways, so she was born May of 2016, and I didn't go back to drinking right away. I was very sick. I was diagnosed with hyperemesis with her. So I was very sick most of the pregnancy. And then after I had her, I didn't, go back to drinking right away. I didn't really, think about it. But once I did, it was like the floodgates were open, and I realized like my tolerance was a lot lower, so I could drink a lot less and feel it more. And this is when she was a couple months old. And just, like always, it was very hard for me just to have one. I had stopped breastfeeding when she was a couple months old. It was, I was moderating, but it was very difficult for me, to moderate. And then this went on for several months, up until it was shortly before her first birthday. And then I started drinking more heavily again. We were living in Arizona at that time. And then we moved to, we moved to Alabama. And during that time, it was just a really, big transition, and we were closer to family. Like I said, we're from Northwest Indiana, so we were about 9 hours away from home. I was able to visit family, more often for long weekends, or, because it was drivable. And when I would visit my family, it was just kind of like a free for all, because I had if I had babysitters around. I never had babysitters, And, they would see me, they knew, they've always kind of known, they've known that I don't know if they knew that I had like a problem like years before that, but they knew that I like to drink a lot. They knew who I was, but I think it was just kind of like accepted, like that's how Kim is. And they also, I think, I don't know if they like felt bad, but they knew that I didn't have, many, resources being a military spouse living by myself. So when I did come home, I guess maybe I got like free pass or something from them to drink as much as I did. But we did have a family event when my daughter was about a year old. And I mean, nothing, super significant happened, but there was kind of some arguments. And it was kind of just like my second revelation. And when my second bout of sobriety started, surfacing, as I realized, all right, like I need to get this together. We had like just moved to Alabama, and my husband's job was going to entail him to be traveling a lot, which meant that I would be with my daughter, alone most of the time. And like I said, there was always a means to an end. So this one was that like my husband was going to be gone a lot. I didn't have any, help. And I knew at that point I'd gotten like, I knew how I drank. I knew I liked to drink a lot. And, so we, that went on for even longer. That bout of sobriety went on about a year. And during that time, I opened an Etsy shop. I mean, I did a lot of things to like keep myself busy being, a stay-at-home mom. I opened an Etsy shop. I made like flower crowns and, handmade, floral grapevine wreaths and stuff like that. I did some freelance work. I ended up getting some part-time work with a local professional organizer. And that I loved doing that when my daughter was at mom's morning out and stuff like that. So, it just like, I ended up like getting really good grades and excelling at school the first time around. The second time around, I was doing a lot of things that filled me. And, with, these part-time jobs and things like that. And my eating issues also declined during that time, because I didn't go back to, like binging and purging and stuff like that. But I was very much still in my, addictive exercise phase and stuff like that. And, a lot of, kind of like restriction, but, limiting portion sizes and stuff like that. So, that went on about a year. And then we ended up moving to Colorado in, February of 2019. And that's kind of when, things really started going downhill. I started drinking before that, again. And it was just like it was like just as bad as it was when I was in my early college days. I really started hiding the alcohol then, and I always kind of hid it from my husband. I mean, I would buy I'd buy jugs of vodka, and then I'd put them in water bottles and hide them throughout the house and storage bins, or the garage, and and stuff like that. And even when we moved, when I was pregnant with my daughter, I mean, I'll never forget, we were packing and we found some of them, and I had completely forgotten about them, and I started going back to that type of behavior where I would buy the alcohol with cash. I'd go to Target and take out an extra $20 or $40 or whatever, and so there was no trace of it. I would go to different liquor stores. So I mean, I thought that maybe someone would, recognize me, but I don't know, things like that. And these behaviors really started intensifying during this time. And, my husband has always been been able to moderate. And yes, I mean, he would see me having, a drink with him, but then I'd always have a vodka water bottle, hidden in my closet or somewhere, when I'd be like, hold on, I'm gonna go to the bathroom, or, I need to go wash my face at the end of the night. And I'd always have something somewhere to sip on to have more. When we moved to Colorado, I decided to do my own professional organizing business, and I started that. But being a military spouse and coming to a different state, not knowing anyone, having no connections, I mean, it was really, really difficult. And I just kind of took on more than I should have, or I really needed to. at that time, and he was gone a lot for school. Whereas before, when he was gone, I knew that like I needed to like step it up, with my daughter, but she was also older now. And now I looked at it more as like kind of like a relief he was gone. Then I didn't have to hide it. There was no one that I had to hide anything from. I mean, I wasn't, my daughter didn't see me directly drinking, you know what I mean? But I didn't have to hide my behavior, or when he said he was coming home from work, I didn't have to like brush my teeth or try to like hide it on my breath or, anything like that. So I really started, I knew then like, okay, this is like more than just like me enjoying drinking. Like a lot of my drinking was done alone. We went to, a lot of work events for my husband, and I was always okay with moderating then. I could have one or two. I mean, I didn't want to, but I was able to. My drinking was always, I was a closet binge drinker. That's what it was. And I didn't want anyone to know my secrets. I also know that like the anticipation of the drink was always, and I know it was like, now I know it's like a rush of dopamine. And I've heard this from other people saying that the anticipation of having a drink is not better, but like is what like keeps you kind of like going. Is that like I just would schedule my days around drinking, events that we'd had, and I would be so excited, like almost like giddy, like knowing that I'd be able to like drink that afternoon or whatever. And around this time I also started like getting really involved in non-toxic living and more holistic living. And so I was changing over, our skincare and our, household products and stuff like that. And I was so concerned about like not ingesting, pesticides and, not using certain products and everything like that. But I was like literally consuming a carcinogen every single day. Around April is when I knew something needed to change. My best friend from middle school has suffered from opioid addiction since we were teens, and she's been in and out of rehab and stuff like that. And she was in rehab during this time, and same with my little brother has also struggled with it as well. And she told me something a long time ago she said something along the lines is like, nothing's going to change if you keep doing the same things that you're doing. Because we would talk, like she was the only one that really knew how much I struggled. And obviously we had like that commonality of, hers was drugs, mine was alcohol. She'd tell me, she's like, Kim, it's honestly like no different. I mean, you have an addiction, but I refuse to believe it. But anyways, I knew that something had to change, and I couldn't just like keep stopping like I was. Something had to change. And long story short, I ended up going on Facebook and finding some groups and doing some Instagram hashtag searches. And that's when I ended up finding This Naked Mind. And I was just like completely like enthralled by this whole idea and, of everything. And I ended up watching a webinar that you had. And I was still drinking during this time. But I decided to order the book, and I would skim the book on days that, I wasn't, drinking or anything like that. But I was, so I was kind of like open to like change, but I wasn't there yet. And that was, April, May-ish of, so I was kind of holding on, a couple steps in. But that summer I went to visit my friend when she got out of rehab. I would just went by myself, and we talked a lot about, just, things that she's, thought about over the years. And she did tell me that like, being accountable is so important. And actually like saying it out loud, not just to like, ourselves and stuff like that, that we need to change, and actually opening up and like telling our, deepest secrets. It's one thing to say that, yeah, I have a drinking problem, or, something needs to change, but another thing to actually be like specific with, behaviors that I was doing, hiding it and, using cash and things like that. And I kept that in mind. But I still wasn't ready. I still wasn't ready to change. That was kind of like the first thing that happened that summer that really started like adding fuel to the fire. The second one was, my husband ended up leaving for 6 weeks to go to a training. And during that time my drinking was at an all-time high. If I wasn't drinking, I was too hungover. my days with my daughter, were scheduled around drinking. I would have my morning routine, stuff like that, cleaning. I'd make sure I'd make dinner early in the day. So if I was drinking kind of in the afternoon, like it wouldn't be a burden, or I wouldn't have to worry about like leaving the stove on or something like that. Like it was all these just like rules that I had.
Yeah.
And, that went on all of August. He came back early, like last week of August, early September. And we ended up having a family, intervention, phone intervention, because I'm, out here in Colorado, with my brother. He had a relapse with, where we thought he did with, opioids. And, I was on the phone, we were on the phone with, my immediate family and like an interventionist and stuff like that. And, I was sitting there like begging my parents to send my brother to rehab, because I firmly believed he needed inpatient rehab. And at the same time, I was sitting there drinking a cocktail, pretty much all vodka, and going back and forth, because my husband was out there with me, and going back and forth and taking, swigs of vodka secretly. And by the time the conversation, ended at the end of the night, like I didn't really remember it. And I remember waking up the next morning, thinking like, how can I sit here, begging to have my, little brother, get this help that he needs, but I'm literally just, drinking, it was so hypocritical. And I just, so that was like kind of like the second thing that summer that kind of added fuel to the fire. And that's honestly like when I started, I'm like, all right, I need, something needs to, happen. I need to, and I started reading the book, and then I realized that there was a podcast to go along with the Snake in Mind. And that opened so many doors. I ended up finding within a matter of just like a week or two, I ended up finding the sober community on Instagram. And I'm not a huge social media person, but I've never searched a hashtag before in my life, and I was like, oh, there's like certain hashtags you can search to like find people that are, like me. And there's just like such a negative stigma towards it, drinking and everything. It's like one or the other, extreme. And I realized there was just like this whole gray area between that I had no idea about. So that's, my mom ended up flying in September, mid-September. We went on a marriage retreat like September 10th or 11th, something like that, here locally in Colorado. I was reading The Snake in Mind, but I don't even know what happened. My husband and I ended up drinking. I went overboard, and then I was super hungover the day that we had to go to the marriage retreat. And it was like 5 p.m. that we went. I mean, I was just like, and I'll never forget, like I ended up reaching out to a sober, we still keep in touch, sober coach. And I didn't know those existed either, on Facebook, or I don't know what it was, and asking, for help. And that was the first time I actually posted in like a Facebook group as well, sharing my struggles. And I couldn't believe the feedback that I got from, people that were just like me and so judgmental and everything. And my mom ended up flying in a couple days later. We went to I had a fertility appointment, and I was still on fertility medications, timing my cycle, trying not to drink during the 2-week wait, all of this. But at the doctor's appointment, they ended up telling us, we really think that you guys need to IVF, but we are going to try to do some, injections. And so when we moved because I was doing all oral medications at that time, to induce ovulation and, produce more follicles. When we moved to the injections, I knew that was like big time, and injections cost a lot of money. So I knew the following month that was like it. Like I couldn't drink at all when I was on this medication. I did not want to ruin my chances. Even though you're not supposed to drink for like months prior, because it can affect your egg quality. It's just, but anyways, that night was kind of like, that was that's how I validated drinking, is that my mom's in town. This is going to be, my last time. I know next month I'm not going to be able to drink anymore. So, I went all in that night. I completely blacked out. And then the next morning we had a tea at a castle here in Colorado Springs with my daughter and my mom. And I was so hungover that day. Like I so hungover that day, and you can just see it in my face, how bloated my, face is in the pictures and stuff. And that afternoon, when we ended up coming home from the tea, I don't know how it happened, but I ended up changing clothes, and my mom and I, my daughter was taking a nap, and we ended up, we're sitting on the living room floor, and it just like came out. I told her, she knew that I had issues with drinking, but didn't know the extent of it. And I just kind of told her everything. And I love my husband, but like I said, he's heard me say it a million times. Oh, I'm done drinking. When I was so hungover, I'm never drinking again. Right. But he's also never, he wouldn't believe me if I told him. He'd be like, all right, okay, yeah. But he just has never really experienced anyone that has had a drinking problem, because he doesn't know how someone can't not moderate, I don't know. So anyways, that was my day one, is September 17th, 2019. This is the longest I've ever gone without a drink. It's been 2.5 years, and it just honestly is, silly as it sounds, it just keeps getting better. And your podcast helped me so much at the beginning. I mean, I listen to it every single day, other people's stories and just your little tidbits. And I've read the book so many times, and I refer back to it. I've referred my family and friends to it. And you speaking so openly about it has enabled me to be more confident in my story as time has gone on. And so anyways, I just want to thank you for that.
Oh, that's so awesome, Kim. Wow. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. I relate to so many parts of your stories, especially how after pregnancy, even if the pregnancy didn't come to term, how the drinking increases, because even that sense of deprivation that you can't do it, whether you're on, the fertility drugs and you're trying to abstain for that, or whether you're actually pregnant or whatever the case is, it's like, it just comes back, and it's such a rebound effect. And I remember just noticing that in my own journey, thinking, gosh, I was so miserable when I was not drinking for pregnancy related reasons. And so I assumed that was just how it was, but I didn't realize that I was trying not to drink something that I thought was the end all be all best thing ever. And I was totally in this state of deprivation, and it doesn't have to be like that at all. Like you don't have to feel completely deprived when you can approach it differently.
Yeah, for sure. And I've also noticed, since obviously, being alcohol free, and as time has gone on, like the, like mommy wine culture, for example. And I never even knew that was a thing like years ago, and it's just everywhere. And I know that I've never said like, I've never blamed my drinking on my, my daughter or anything like that. And I don't know if it's, maybe struggling with, infertility has made me view things a little bit differently, and we also, only have one child. I don't have, multiple kids that, but how prominent it is. And obviously we talk about this in the book and everything, but, normalized, in society, like, especially among moms and on social media, and oh my gosh,
Yeah, it's amazing. And sometimes I see things in the media and I'm like, oh, it's losing its clench a little bit. And then sometimes I'm like, oh, no, we're still really deep into it. It just kind of goes back and forth, but.
Right. Especially around the holidays. I've noticed it, picks up around that time. So.
For sure. Everybody's dealing with the stress. So let me ask you, Kim, the question that I kind of finished these off with, which is, if you were going to go back in time to Kim, who is, experiencing these terrible hangovers during points in her life where she should have been really enjoying those moments, and, just talk to her about what life is like for you now, what would you say?
See, I honestly, I was never really ready to, stop drinking. And I think that it's so important to, realize that we're always quick to say, because alcohol is so normalized, that, none of us want to believe that alcohol is the problem. We want to blame it on something else, something that's, wrong with us, internally, or, family, or, job, any sort of life stressors, things like that. And that's what I always did. I always wanted to blame it on everything else, why I was the way I was. And and I'm not saying that what my life automatically, became so much better once I stopped drinking, but I was able to dig into other parts of myself once I was able to finally, free myself from drinking. And I mean, it wasn't easy. I struggled for a very long time at the beginning, and I sometimes still struggle with triggers, but I would just go back and tell her that, obviously it's going to be okay, but the drinking is definitely contributing to, your anxiety, your depression, your lack of self-worth, lack of self-confidence, your accomplishments in life or lack, thereof, issues in your marriage. It's just a filtering effect. And I guess I would also go back and tell her to read The Naked Mind sooner.
That's awesome. Yeah. Well, that's so cool. I love that so much. Oh, wow. Is there anything else you want to add in or?
No, I don't think so. I think that's it. I mean, I guess the last thing would just be that there's a lot of, with drinking, there's a lot of co-addictions I've noticed. I am going back to school to get my master's in public health, something I never thought I would do because I didn't even think I would graduate college. And I start in a couple of days, so I'm really excited about that. And I really hope to focus in on, behavioral health is my concentration, and get into alcohol and, drug recovery, as well as eating disorders, and just see the overlap between these areas. And I guess if you're a parent and you're watching this and you have kids, just be open with them. And if you see any signs, talk to them. Don't brush things under the rug, Yeah.
I love that so much. And congratulations. That sounds like a super exciting new chapter. So
thanks. Thanks.
Well, thank you so much, Kim. I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your story. It was really beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hey, it's Annie Grace. I want to tell you about the most important book that I never wrote. And I mean that. This is This Naked Life. It's 48 true stories of people finding freedom from alcohol, and it's so inspiring. It's our stories, as you know from this podcast, that truly change us, that revolutionize what we believe is possible for ourselves. So it's This Naked Life. You can find it on Amazon or check it out online. Even download it 100% free at nakedlifestories.com. And every single copy that you buy, all the proceeds are 100% committed to keeping the alcohol experiment forever free for anybody who needs it. So check it out. It's such an inspirational book. And as always, rate, review, and subscribe to this podcast, as it truly helps the message reach somebody who might need to hear it today.